Well, safe to say Cadillac's debut went off with a bang now, didn't it? And I'm not talking about the commercial. Well, actually, I kind of am, because Michael Bay is suing the Cadillac Formula One team for breach of contract, which kind of makes the explosive jokes unavoidable. But indeed, Cadillac's debut during the Super Bowl and around Times Square finally closed a 3-year saga I've watched unfold since I started covering F1 on YouTube. And there is plenty to unpack here, including a Rolling Stones report saying that Michael Bay is seeking a lawsuit for at least $1.5 million over an alleged bait and switch. Not exactly the vibe that you try and aim for one of the biggest sporting events in American culture. And I bet you, Stefano Domenicali, he is the happiest man in the world right now. This is the reason why he got this deal across the line, even though he was originally opposed to the idea. But anyway, this is the exact insertion of Formula One into the American market that he and Liberty Media wanted. During the Super Bowl, no other team has been able to do this before, because they wouldn't have had the gall to sink in $1 to $2 million for a commercial slot. General Motors did! And all the casuals, the American casuals, the football guys, they saw a Caddy logo on a Formula One car! Yeah! Oh yeah, Stefano, very much a happy bunny. Not the only happy bunny at that event. I mean, sure, Stefano got the die-hard European car nuts intrigued with tempting Audi into Formula One with the engine regulations, but the American nugget? Oh, they very much got that with a Times Square reveal as well. And a mention during that football game, with allusions to John F. Kennedy's "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech, in Cadillac accepting the challenge to race in F1 not because it's easy, but because it is hard. You might think it's a gimmick, but quite honestly, it is a very good example of how America was willing to push itself through a really tricky endeavour, and they came out the other side actually fulfilling their goal by the end of the decade. As John F. Kennedy said. I mean, it's big shoes to fill with that statement, but at least Cadillac wants to be taken seriously, and they're not hiding behind the, oh, be patient with us, we're brand new, which admittedly Audi is doing, but Cadillac, no. They are just saying, oh, forget that! But admittedly, what we actually got with the livery and the way it presented itself, that commercial, it felt like a deleted scene from the Formula One movie, which I also found quite neat. And the scale of the task was summed up neatly by their driver Sergio Perez, who said Cadillac would be very disappointed after all this to finish 11th in the Constructors. I shall share Checo's comments with you for your consideration. We are definitely not having that mindset of being last, not with the level of investment that has been put in place. We will definitely be very disappointed to finish last. We know we will not win the championship for sure, but we definitely want to make a lot of progress and beat a couple of teams. This is a team that has recruited people from basically all the teams that I've been with. I think this team, this structure, has the capacity to go a very long way in the sport. I think it's going to become a very important team in the future of Formula One. No, Checo, it is already an important team in the present of Formula One. And I know it's easy to dunk on Cadillac because they're American. It's a very easy cheap shot to do right now. But honestly, I really never doubted the seriousness of this operation, originally spearheaded by Michael Andretti. This organisation, this group, has really wanted to know how Formula One operates, and they have done their homework throughout the entire process. I have not once said, ooh, I don't like the look of that. Oh, they're really trying to milk the teat of Formula One popularity. No. I think Michael Andretti really understood how much of a fool he made himself out to be in 1993 and was trying to correct that mistake. But then Greg Maffei and Liberty Media were just like, no! We remember what you did, Michael. But I will admit, Downtaurus and TWG's polish and FOM's insistence on General Motors ponying up more influence has hidden all of that a little bit behind corporate veneer. And that corporate veneer is exactly why, in a way, Checo's comments matter, because they're aggressive. By setting a minimum standard this publicly, he's forcing the team to match the ambition or look like idiots. That's really unusual for a brand new operation, because they're rejecting the traditional excuse phase new teams are actually allowed. I will give them credit for that. And Checo is telling the team, you cannot lose gracefully. You cannot accept that, oh, we are definitely lost because we're brand new, because otherwise you are going to die on that hill, and you will be very unlikely to recover from it. Given the fact this is a brand new regulation cycle, there's ample opportunity to try and get your foot in the door for what Haas was able to do, for example, in their first year. They didn't come last. And I think you can imagine that the size of Haas and Cadillac in year one, complete night and day. Checo, therefore, is punchy, and for a good reason, to remind people who only remember the last couple of years of his tenure with Red Bull in the declining Horner era. He still has a lot to give Formula One, especially teams who are very much underdogs or in the midfield where they need every single big points finish and podium they can find. And I think Cadillac hiring as his race engineer Carlo Passetti, who was his race engineer back at Racing Point, is a very big indicator of all of that. A guy who was able to extract a lot from Checo in that time where he then culminated his first win at Sakhir. I'm really curious about where that actually goes. And again, that whole thing was a subtle flex to everyone in the organization, that you cannot rest on your laurels and just assume that it's all going to be absolutely dire. Well, why on earth would they have hired you? Because you've already been in Formula One, you know what it takes to do well in the sport. We're not a bunch of newbies here. And I don't think Checo would come out this loudly unless he's seen something genuine within the organisation that he really, really likes and that he saw a lot of in Red Bull when times were good, and he believes that could come Cadillac's way in the fullness of time, once they've gotten some experience down. At the same time, though, he does actually show a genuine sense of fear to be brandished with the wooden spoon, because admittedly, to many people, if that were to happen and Checo was influenced and involved with it, they pretty much would just come toward him with absolute pitchforks and just blame him, and I don't think that's how he would want his legacy to end. Because finishing last these days just shows that you are slow as an organisation. I'm not talking about the car itself, because that could be slow for one reason or another. That could be unreliability, it could be just downright bad luck during a race itself. No. If you are last, that tends to tell people that your organisation is a little bit rubbish, as we saw with Alpine throughout 2025. And after all of these years of preparation, building up hype, the insertion of General Motors into the actual endeavor, and all of the stuff they've been buying and developing at Silverstone and in Indiana, and then they just come out with last on the first bounce, oh, that would be a hugely bitter pill to swallow, and Ford would be smirking with triumph. Points are only scored if the car is there to be able to do the job, and the drivers are able to trust that car enough to be able to try and score points, because as we've heard many times throughout the last few weeks, it's going to be very important if you have the car that you can really rely and depend upon lap after lap without it being all jerky and inconsistent on you. And a new team can easily be within touching distance on pace, yet still end up dead last due to all of the learning going on, because they are, admittedly, a patchwork of other teams, all with their own procedures. So they've got every right to be terrified, or maybe motivated, to not be the team where they are lost, because that could easily turn into their culture. And this team, they're all about cultural significance, so that would be a disease that Checo himself, as well as Dan Tauris, are trying to stop it spreading within their group. But of course, there was more to the launch than simply Checo's comments, but the nature of it itself. They launched like a team, trying to recruit the world in real time, and they did it in a manner which no other team has done, nor would even try to. And remember, this team was born in the cost cap era. Their organisation was built around the cost cap instead of an existing team having to adapt and either downsize or tweak things, hire, fire, etc. for efficiency. No, it means they're more than willing to fire out into the distance instead of trying to rearrange furniture or something like that. They don't have to worry about that. They've built things ready to go, and they know exactly where they need to go to try and expand while still being in the cost cap. And the livery is the first clue in all of that. Now, my first impressions were a little bit mixed because I did miss the colour, but when I stopped back to look at it and what Dan Tauris was talking about, it started to make a little bit more sense that, hey, this livery had some artistic meaning. Because he straight up says, Dan, every detail is intentional, and that this represents who they are. Bold and modern and unmistakably American. I mean, okay, I don't see any red or blue or eagle heads, but okay, I trust you, I'll take your word for it. He also explicitly frames the reveal itself as part of the identity, again, Super Bowl, Times Square, to connect with fans far beyond the paddock, in places where Formula One doesn't necessarily tread. And team boss Graham Loudon basically says the same thing, calling it a move tied to ambition and innovation, done in a way that's never been done by an F1 team before. And then the president of GM, Mark Royce, frames it as a milestone in a journey that started years ago with momentum building toward Melbourne. That and the other comments, perfectly valid. All of it is. All of this began in 2023 with Michael Andretti, and General Motors stuck by them the whole time, and they were the ones to cross the finish line. And that in of itself is a huge achievement. Well done. Even after Formula One rejected the initial structure and demanded the hand-holding of one of the biggest motoring corporations in the world. But from what I've seen and everything else around this launch, this is very much a recruitment drive in many respects. We're talking about fans, we're talking about potential stuff for the future, as well as potential sponsors, because Mr. Tower has called it an intersection of performance, culture, and entertainment. Yeah, that does sound a little bit corporate for my taste, but I do understand the message behind it, in that trying to meet all of these three different branches, which in a way are very different from one another, because they have different requirements, and try to make the best out of it. Because Cadillac and the Andretti Global bid were all about trying to gather resources that would easily appeal to those who require stability and understanding that this concept does have legs and longevity. The engineers. Because they want to work somewhere that feels like it's going somewhere, and in the case of F1, it helps that they've got a base Cadillac in UK's Motorsport Valley, so they don't have to change their commute too much, as well as having a project that is capable of these grandiose moves in publicity, as well as putting in all that money for commitment. So golly, all of this looks tasty, doesn't it? And funded, and protected. Job security and the chance for exposure. And again, the livery paints this really well, what with the asymmetrical split. One side dark, one side light. A reminder of the BAR 001 livery of 1999, but the difference here is that the split of 26 is intentional, unlike BAR's, which was more of a finger up towards Bernie Ecclestone because he wouldn't allow them to run two separate tobacco liveries to be run at the same time. They didn't score. And they had horrible reliability. As I said in my first impressions short, I was a little bit disappointed to not see any colour, given the rules have stated that your car has to be mostly filled with colour, and instead they've gone for a silver, white, black, and I understand it's part of the branding of Cadillac these days. It's just a shame after all of the colour that we have seen, and what we could expect from Aston Martin, with Breitling coming on a touch of yellow, and then with the lime green, and then with the green. That in itself is intriguing. So having just white, silver, and black, okay, unless we're going for 2005 to 1997 McLarens. But I do think it also has some symbolism in that it's an internal diagram as to how Cadillac expects to win in the future, because it is a two-pronged project. There is one half in Silverstone, and there's one based in Fishers, Indiana, near the beating heart of American motorsport, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That and Silverstone. That tells you all you need to know. A cultural split and a logistical split. The UK motorsport brain on one side and the American industrial and branding muscle on the other. Most teams would pretend that it's all one cohesive unit like Haas, but Cadillac is choosing to deliberately show both sides of their operation. Really artsy upon reflection, but it could easily be lost with the fact of, oh, where's the colour? It does sound a little pretentious, but this move gives the team permission to appeal to both camps of theirs at the same time, without feeling like they're stepping on the toes of the other. The purists of Formula One look to the fact that, hey, cool, they've got a Silverstone base, that's nice. Or the American fans that understand Cadillac and would want to get behind all of the hype, well, you've got your side too. You can all bask in the glory of your team at the same time without even having to interact with one another if you didn't want to. It's a real political advantage, and given Formula One is really cutthroat when it comes to politics, and yeah, it can easily murder performance fast if you get it wrong, this is a very good start to show that you have got some good political agility. And Ferrari, looking at all of this, their brand new custom coming in with all of this heft and agility and style and poise, oh, mamma mia! So making their initial identity this explicit this early on is a very big move. And this could easily put to bed any sort of confusion with a brand new team as to what exactly is this thing. Well, with Cadillac doing what they've done right now and what they've been doing up until this point, we now know. They are trying to bridge the gap towards the casual fan and the serious fan, slightly leaning to the casual side a little bit more, but still very much got a pedigree in core motorsport, what with all of the stuff they've been doing in other disciplines such as World Endurance and IMSA. Cadillac know what they're doing when it comes to high-performance motorsport in the modern day. They just wish to bring Cadillac in. It's going to take a long time, sure, but they do have a strong sense of intent right now. So, too long didn't watch. If you want to boil this down, it reminds me of that skit in The Simpsons where it's a western, there are two guys standing off each other, Abe Simpson comes in and address goes, "Wait, stop! You both can marry me! Yeehaw!" And everyone's happy. This is what I'm seeing right here. I bet you thought that Michael Bay lawsuit was just window dressing, I would say at the top of the video, just to get your attention. Well, no. This is all part of the plan. The breaking of that story just before the launch, before the Super Bowl, with the regular F1 news then covering it, and then Cadillac's response denying it, it all paints a fascinating picture that is worth talking about here. Because the suit alleges Cadillac wanted a Michael Bay commercial at a bargain price, and then GP Blog says it's an alleged message from Darius to Bay, expressing dissatisfaction with how it played out, and suggesting a future project without an agency in the middle. Cadillac denies wrongdoing and says Bay couldn't meet their timeline, and that the concept and creative were already developed, and they were only exploring him as a director. Whatever the legal truth ends up being, this project runs hot. There's deadlines here, there's swings, there's moving parts, complicated stakeholders. It's really messy here, but it also can be a preview of how they'll approach the racing side, giving me the impression that this team is very much in a hurry. They don't want to be betting themselves in a way which is like Audi at the moment, where they want to take things very slowly. It's only until 2030 where they'll actually be competitive and winning races. No, Cadillac has understood the homework. They want to show everyone that they are capable of being able to do very well. It might take a little bit of time, but they are very punchy from the start, which is very unusual. I'm thinking, okay. Cadillac, they're choosing high exposure and high expectations already. I mean, you've only got to look at their slogan they're using on socials, progress under pressure. And Checo's quote reads like a driver who wants the pressure turned up because he thinks the team has enough adults in the room to survive it. None of this gets them 10th or higher though, no. But it does make the shape of their risk slightly different, because finishing 11th can happen for the most boring of reasons, such as reliability issues, slow pit stops, upgrades that don't land. Even a team that isn't the slowest car can finish last because your car keeps bugging out on you. It was like the Sauber at the beginning of 2024. It wasn't necessarily the slowest car out there. It had the potential to score with Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas, but either the car just bugged out on them in terms of the engine going bang, or they had really painfully slow stops. We're talking nearly a minute. Any chance of them scoring points that early on to get at least a foothold closer to the double figures, it all evaporated. I mean, at least Zhou Guanyu eventually scored and got them 4 points on one go. And the same thing could happen with Cadillac, that their car for 2026 starts off as fairly solid, but if they keep making mistakes, then they could find themselves in last place. But there is a reason to suggest that they can at least leapfrog one team in Formula One, that there is a strong case for them at least being 10th. And of course, that involves Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. They're not rookies. A new team with 2 drivers who can diagnose issues? Yeah, I thought it was quite boring at the time, but it is incredibly valuable. And it helps that they've got patience too, both of them. They also can read false positives, so it's less likely these newbies go down the wrong path developmentally speaking. Helps in the case of Sergio, they brought back his old race engineer, like I said earlier, because it's somebody who could easily translate Checo's feedback to the other staff immediately. Basically, they don't look like a bunch of no-hopers, Cadillac, and then there's Zhou Guanyu's input too. Because outside of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari engineers based around Maranello, Zhou has one of the most in-depth wells of knowledge about the SF26's power unit than anyone else on the grid, and Cadillac has got the guy right there. And Graham Loudon, the team principal, is his manager. The part of the remit of them being Ferrari customers is that they have a conduit to Maranello, not just the engineers, but also the driver. He will be very important in that. And then they've also got their trusted sidekick from the Andretti IndyCar thing going through F2, Colton Herta. Their feedback loop via their drivers are people that Cadillac can absolutely and explicitly trust. There is no gamesmanship here. They're all in the same bag. Colton one day wants to get into Formula One. Zhou Guanyu wants to get back into Formula One. And Bottas and Checo, they want to try and correct the mistakes that tarnished their endgames in 2024. Due to other reasons. Either the car was absolutely terrible, the Sauber, or the Red Bull political side of things made Checo out to be incredibly incompetent, even though it was proved not that long after there was definitely a problem with the car and the way it was managed. And given that the Ferrari power unit stacked up an impressive lap count and showed no real reliability gremlins, it's like with Williams and Mercedes. At least for Cadillac, one variable is out of the picture and they don't have to worry about it. They have a tested engine. They can focus on the other controllables. And yes, this year's reset will give the team some additional leeway, because even the established teams can run into problems, causing confusion and delay. So if Cadillac wants to avoid coming last, then all they gotta do is just be competent while someone else panics and flails around. Have fewer surprises than the other teams and points will naturally come their way, and they can start to emulate what happened with Haas in 2016, because nobody expected them to score points early on in the season, especially on their debut in Australia, because as soon as that happened, the tone really shifted regarding Haas. Instead of thinking, oh, what are these guys about? Their model's not going to work. They score points, they finish 8th in the Constructors in their first season. Oh, okay. All right, this is interesting then. We very much were treating you too harshly there, Haas. I mean, yeah, they did go on to finish last a couple of other times, but we never say that Haas should be out of the sport anymore. They very much earned their keep. I mean, just look at their current suitor at the moment, Toyota. I mean, that's impressive. And Cadillac is acting like a team that wants to try and emulate that and do it even faster. They're selling inevitability to justify their place on the Formula One grid and try and establish that to many more people, not the people who have been au fait with the story of Andretti Global, then morphed into Cadillac for the last 3 years, to get a bigger audience. You know, those who weren't around during all of the commercial resistance of Formula One, and the team's still kind of salty about Cadillac only paying $450 million to get into Formula One instead of the ideal $600 million. It's still more than the original $200 that was being floated around in 2023. Come on, guys, you get $45 million apiece. That's no chump change there. And I'm not saying that Cadillac's expecting or promising the world here, they just want to be taken seriously is all. They just don't want to be seen as some podunk operation that's just in because Formula One is popular. The only difference here is that they have much more commercial punch than they would have done if they were just Andretti Global. And also, Stefano, Formula One, they really need Cadillac to do well. They don't have to be amazing, just credible, because a GM-backed American team floundering immediately at the back would be a bad look for the sport's US ambitions, even though you might be thinking, well, that's not where the hockey puck is going at the moment, where America is in the global world, but Dominicali has committed himself, and all of this stuff doesn't necessarily buy Cadillac wins, but it does buy you patience, and in Formula One, patience is real political oxygen here, but you're still wondering if they will come last or not. Sure, it can happen, but it would be wrong to suggest it will happen. And both Checo and Valtteri will stand them in good stead. They're guys who've seen what a good team looks like and what a dysfunctional team looks like, as well as feel like. I could easily see Cadillac scoring quite a few points in the flyaway races simply down to the fact that there'll be other teams who really screwed the pooch that little bit harder. Or it could easily come down to Sergio and Valtteri reading the room in a particular race and recalling a race where they did well and seek to exploit it, and they can then pass that through to Cadillac and they score big because of that. They get a blockbuster result. And it would make all of the stuff they've done up to that point, including buying some airtime during the Super Bowl, look like a wise and logistical decision rather than just being a silly spend just because they can. However, there is a situation where they could just end up picking up table scraps, 1 point here, and then add just a few of them to their name, but it's still enough for them to finish not last because someone was even worse. Or they find themselves in the mix of situations in the midfield where they are considered a bunch of scrappers. And all of this done not necessarily having a very good car, you just are there to pick up the pieces. Also, Cadillac's split identity could really come in clutch as they evolve, because they're completely new. They've perhaps built faster internal feedback loops than at least one established team, that might either be stuck with old habits or going through their own, maybe more layered refreshes. And also, they've got something that can easily go to bed and wake up in one country, and then go to bed and wake up in another one. A lot of F1 advantage can be done on the organisational level and how quickly things can get done. And the way that Cadillac is talking about being intentional and innovative, it really suggests they're trying to build exactly that kind of learning machine and try to make decisions quickly and not get bogged down in red tape or fear paralysis. Just learn. So you could boil all of the stuff that we saw overnight and many of us Europeans are waking up to in the morning as some kind of big public stress test. They very much put themselves out in the open for all the people who may not know much about Formula One or know nothing about Formula One at all in two of the most public American arenas going. And the real test for them is whether they can actually live up to their slogan of progress under pressure without falling apart. I think they've got every reason to do the business, because Checo's already telling you, and Bottas is doing his own thing, and that he agrees that they can do well, and that the team understands the assignment, that they understand what they got themselves into, and they are fully committed. There are no warning signs or really worried expressions from either of them. They look happy to be there. My take on all of this? Yeah, they could finish last, but there is an equally big possibility that they could do something that flips the narrative. They could easily put in a real blockbuster performance through the fact that other people completely mess up. In one of my bold predictions, they might gather themselves a podium for simply making good use of the strategy, like Nico Hülkenberg did with Sauber last year with his first podium. No one expected that, but Hülkenberg read the conditions and had a car that he fully trusted. The same thing could happen with Cadillac. And the project that Michael Andretti built and GM carried on, they could easily become a very stable platform with the heft of American interest, giving them more momentum to then invest in the more traditional British engineering side of things. So despite the glitz of Americana we saw with that ad, I still respect this team getting here, even though I just wish for a little bit of caddy yellow on that livery. And what do you wish for? Well, I believe partly a wish could be easily found in this video right here that you can go and watch right now. I'll see you over there.